Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Everyone, I'll wait for some people to put their headphones on. Make sure the whole room is ready to go. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Nicole Smith in External Relations at Amazon, focused on scam prevention. So happy to have you here at our session, Beyond the Scam. We've heard a lot over the last day and a half about how to prevent scams, how to, collaborate together, information share, and really a lot about prevention. And we're really happy that you've dedicated this time today to talk about when someone does get scammed. What happens then? What support can we give? We're going to talk about the challenge of that. What is happening now? What different organizations are doing now? And then the gaps. We're going to talk about what we're not doing and what more could be done. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I will go ahead and pass it off to our first speaker, Mel from the BBB Institute.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Mel Lanning. I'm with the Better Business Bureau, more specifically with the BBB Institute for Marketplace Trust, which is the educational foundation of the association. I'm going to kick us off today with just a little bit of data and a little setting up the sort of the victim services space, if you will. Okay, actually, that's not my slide. Hold on. There we go. Okay. We'll go back. So we're not going to talk about financial losses today. We've talked a lot about that over the last day and a half. We're really going to talk about the impact on victims. Or in some cases, we call them survivors because the situation can be really traumatic. One thing on this slide, though, we can't address victims without talking about the increase in financial losses. It's a really important piece of what's going on. This slide actually was created last week, and there's already an update to it. So you can see here that FTC reported a total of $12.5 billion in what was reported to them in 2024. Their 2023 estimate, trying to look at underreporting and taking that into account, was $158 billion. As of Monday, they actually updated that figure for 2024, and it's actually $195.9 million. And so the reason I brought this up to start with is just because the losses continue to go up, and without getting into any data on scam types, the types of scams that we're seeing on our list of what we call riskiest scams are financial grooming and relationship scams. And the reason I bring that up is because those scam types have a huge impact on the people who have been part of them. And so we're going to talk about that just a little bit. This is from some of the data that's reported to the Better Business Bureau. So we have a platform called BBB Scam Tracker. People can come in and report scams. And so every year we have a full report that comes out. Our next one for this year will be out in March. This is from 2024. And we do survey research to accompany what's been reported to us. And one of the big things we saw, and I think this was mentioned yesterday, our percentage is a little lower than what was reported yesterday, but about 30% of people who have been impacted by scams said their mental health was impacted, just generally. So that's a huge thing. In addition to the financial implications and everything that goes with it, their mental health has been impacted. I'm not going to get into the other things. We know that there's lots of different impacts. We did ask them, however, to give us more specifics on how they were feeling, what the aftermath was of the scam incident, where they were falling. As you can see here, anger was the number one emotion that they told us. Loss of trust, which we've talked a lot about the last day and a half, has a huge impact on everybody here, our whole society. The one that I've highlighted here is the next one, which is 53.5% said they experienced anxiety, stress, or trauma. So trauma, that's significant, right? When you start talking about how you're feeling trauma, that's a huge. You know that the impact on your emotional state has been significant. Right below that is shame and embarrassment. And we're going to talk a little bit today a lot about shame and how that can inhibit that person's need to sort of take action to help themselves recover. So I also on that slide that I didn't get into is it can impact relationships with loved ones, with friends. It can impact your reputation, if you will. So there's all these different things that can happen. Duration of a scam incident, this is related to what I mentioned at the very beginning, and that is the growth of these relationship scams, these financial grooming scams, if you will. Some people call them pig butchering in some cases. We looked at what was going on, and what we're seeing is that some of these scams that are reported to us, the duration of the actual incident is actually expanding. So those relationships they're taking more time. Scammers are taking the time to build trust with their targets. And that, as we know, for that person that's been targeted, the impact is going to be that much more significant because they've got a relationship with this person. This slide is really showing that the longer the incident goes on, the more likely that person is to lose money. I don't think anyone's surprised by that. I think the big thing here is just to understand that the way scams are being perpetrated are changing. And you see here, I don't know why that didn't come in. So for some reason, this slide didn't come through. But the other piece of this we're going to talk a little bit about is another piece of our research. Over the last 3 years, we asked people how many times they lost money to a scam. And that for the last 3 years, we have seen that percentage go up. So in other words, re-victimization is up. That means if some folks are getting scammed multiple times. And so this is something we need to talk about when we talk about, helping victims. How do we get them the knowledge they need to make sure that if they are retargeted again, they're empowered to stop it and we can protect them. We know that scammers are trying to then come back in and say, I can get your crypto back. I can get your money back. I can help you rework your credit. There's all these things that they're going to promise. And this person is in a dire strait in some cases, of course, so this can have a huge impact. So just a little bit on just the recovery of helping people with scams that I wanted to talk about. There's some things that we're going to talk about today. And one of them is just deception and confusion. So in some cases, people are just confused on whether or not they were scammed or not. They're trying to figure it out. I would just say that in our research, we did ask for romance scammers. How many of the folks who, when they started to suspect they were being scammed, stopped communicating with the person that was scamming them? 28.1% didn't cut the relationship off right away, and 3.5% were still speaking to them. So I bring that up just because these are complicated situations, right? In some cases, these folks who aren't even sure what happened, they're not sure if they've been scammed, they need to talk to somebody. I actually talked to a woman over the summer who, this is just another example, who had reported the scam to the IC3 and never heard back. Of course, we know the IC3 gets 1 million reports, right? They can't respond to everybody. What she told us is that when they didn't respond, she just figured, well, this guy must be legit, right? Because they didn't come back and tell me. And so she continued the scam. She continued that relationship because she hadn't heard back. So these are the complexities of some of the situations that are going on. She sort of worked that out in her own head that everything was okay. And of course, the scammer who she was talking to played on that story and said, that's right, you didn't hear back. This is a situation which obviously I'm legit because they would have told you otherwise. So he took advantage of that situation as well. So the psychological barriers and stigma, folks who feel that stigma of what happened may not be telling anyone about it. They may not want to talk about it to get the help that they need. And that's a huge issue with anyone who's had this experience, is we want to make sure people feel empowered to reach out and get the help that they need. Another thing I want to mention is the need for trauma-informed training. We've heard from folks that we talked to that the scammer is a heck of a lot nicer than that customer service person that was supposed to help me. So we need a little bit more trauma-informed training for everybody. fragmented support. We know there's limited resources. You're going to hear some great stuff today, some new programs that are happening that is very hopeful. And I think that the future, one of the things we want is we want less fragmented support. We want to combine some of these. We want to do a better job handing off, because we know these folks don't just need one kind of help, right? They need different kinds of things, and we're going to hear about that today. I already talked about recovery scams. And then the other thing is the complexity of modern scams. This can make recovery also really complicated, because there may be multiple payment methods, multiple jurisdictions involved, multiple communications methods. So even trying to pull in what happened and getting evidence and so forth can be really complicated. So just highlighting some of the things that can make scam recovery really, really challenging. So this is something on our website. I won't spend a lot of time on this. It's on the BBB Institute's website. We pass this out every year. And this is just something for folks to think about. We developed this with some of the scam survivors that we talk to. And that is how to have that conversation with a friend or a family member. We all know somebody who's been scammed. And if we just know that sometimes you could say the wrong thing and you can make the situation so much worse. And so this is just some tips for folks on if you're going to talk to scam survivors, things to think about. And like I said, this was reviewed and vetted by some of the scam survivors that have worked with us. Avoid victim blaming language. Make sure that they know this was the criminal's fault, not your fault. Actively listen, hear them out, never judge them. Lead with empathy. Try to put yourself in their situation, understand what that might feel like. And then recognize their courage, telling stories, telling the story yesterday on the main stage. That took an incredible amount of courage, and so we just have to recognize that. Just a couple more things. The BBB developed our scam survival toolkit to sort of start to address this. We have focused for years on fraud prevention. Over the last 3 years, we've really started to try to bulk up our resources for victims. And this is something that's part of our scam tracker platform. So if somebody doesn't know where to go, they go into that platform. They identify themselves as an individual or a business. If they're an individual, where they live, in this case, the United States or Canada. If they're a military consumer, because there's extra different resources for military consumers, and they say how they paid, what happened, if they, so forth, and they get a very personalized next steps on what to do. It's a good handoff to some of these great organizations you're going to hear about today. And it also reduces the sort of stress of trying to find what you need. It just tries to provide it right up front for what they need. If any of you have questions about that, please come find me. We're making constant iterations and updates to this, so always welcome for feedback on that. And then last of all, Scam Survivor Day. We established this 2 years ago when we launched the toolkit. It's one day where we recognize scam victims. It's not about all the numbers. It's not about all the losses. It's really about scam survivors and what we can do to help. And so the next year at Amazon, we will host the 3rd annual event in person, but it goes beyond that. It'll also be online, and lots of, I know our BBB network does a lot of stuff in their local communities to talk about this. So if anyone has any questions about this, I would welcome you to come talk to me about it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
Well, hello, everybody. Great to see all of you. And I've been in this space with AARP, with the Fraud Watch Network, since 2018. My work before that was sort of public policy and retirement income security, but it became helping workers understand the importance of planning and saving for retirement. I did 9 years with Ernst & Young, going to major accounting for our clients of the major accounting firm there, to get to their big companies and say, here's what the pension is, here's what the 401k is. And it was all about save for retirement. Well, now I'm in a place where I'm talking to those workers who are now retired going, you did the right thing, but guess what? You are at extreme risk for financial insecurity because of the fraud crisis. Mel mentioned the number that came out from the Federal Trade Commission this week. $196 billion in a single year. If you equate that to a company's size, that's Fortune 17. It's roughly $535 million leaving our economy to go into drug trafficking, human trafficking, all the bad things you can think of. Leaving our economy to support those nefarious economies. So this is a crisis. Victim voices are so important. We shared with you the very amazing Lori Flowers yesterday, and we shared some voices as well from some of our people that work with us in these victim support group sessions. And we have a few more we want to let you hear today. It's a lot of the same. This is really horrible in what it has done to me. There's also little signs of hope and how things could be looked at a little bit differently. So I want to share that with you, and I'm not sure which I do first. Do I just hit this?
Because of my fraud experience, I felt stupid, ignorant, I hated myself, and I wanted to kill myself. Today I realize that this event was not my fault. I was a naive victim of professional thieves who make it their life's mission to rob people of their life savings.
Because of my fraud experience, my entire life has changed. My retirement money, the money from the sale of my house, 2 loans were stolen from me, as well as 2 other loan scams overdrawing my accounts. I was depressed, paralyzed, heartbroken, hopeless, and suicidal, unable to eat or sleep. Praying and my faith brought me to the peer groups, and they are my lifeline, providing empathy, support tools to live by, including knowing that I am a victim.
Because of my fraud experience, I felt broken. Participating in AARP support groups and counseling therapy continues to help me on my healing journey. I hope to use my experience to help others in the future.
Because of my scam experience, I have felt the emotions of self-loathing and despair. And I've also learned the healing power that a support group can provide.
Because of my fraud experience, I chastise myself for ignoring such obvious red flags that occurred while being drawn under the ether. However, because of my fraud experience, I now have a mission, I know what to do, and I trust myself to do it.
So to put a finer point on it, victimization is a horrible experience that nobody should have to go through. But if we're giving the support, the emotional support, the financial recovery, legal, legislative support, it isn't all over for these people. We can do so much more. And I'm going to turn it back over to Nicole in just a second. But I also wanted to tell you one of the best experiences I've had in the last 2 days was a few hours ago when I realized they were taking pictures of you so you could look like a superhero. And if you don't know, go to the GASA desk at the beginning. You'll see an umbrella. The umbrella's there because they're doing these things. You can't see this, but I actually feel like a fraud fighter right now, like a real one, because I'm kicking somebody's ass. And it just makes you feel really good, and I think you all should do it too.
Okay, thank you so much, Mel and Kathy. You really set the stage for, what the challenge is, what these scam victims might be going through, and now we can start thinking about, what kind of support they may need. So I would love to invite our next speakers up. We're going to be hearing from, and you guys can come on up. We're going to be hearing from AARP, Given Hour, Capital One, Amazon, and the Scam Justice Legal Clinic, and Euroconsumers.
All right, I'm starting. I've got my picture this time, so we're already way ahead of the last time we were in here together, if you were here for the last one. My last talk in this room was about infrastructure and processes and things, and I went a little light on the customer because of the nature of the conversation, but I'm really incredibly honored to have been invited to represent Capital One in this particular conversation. Customers are a thing that we have to take care of. In all of the moments, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about like the two sides of when things go wrong for our customers. I think, to steal a comment that Ben made in an earlier panel, fraud practitioners forced to reckon with this scamdemic, the proliferation of scam and the MOs, especially for financial institutions, is a little unintuitive. I made a comment earlier, our intuition is to go left. We are trying to keep the bad thing from happening. We've done a pretty incredible job. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the way that we protect our customers from scams, even though I know the focus is going to be on the right side of the bad thing. Our journey started much earlier. I'm on the credit card side of Capital One. I lead our ecosystem partnerships, a strategy team within our credit card division. We realized by looking into sort of pandemic scams that the methodology we were looking at to make sure that our customers were not falling for pandemic scams revealed a much bigger problem. That scam merchant transactions were a much bigger part of the volume that we were seeing, that our customers were suffering from. So we were pretty quick to stand up in a year or so, scam investigations, scam strategy team, develop new authorization strategies, create new thresholds, get legal and compliance approvals to do all of these things, create unique, novel alerts for customers that we believe may be transacting with scams, sending customers that had previously transacted with the now known scam merchant alerts, communications, giving them ways to recover on those transactions. In our bank business, which I'm sort of representing today, one of the things that I know many other financial institutions have deployed with the expansion of Zelle are slowdown moments, right? Wires, account to account, Zelle payments. If they feel unusual, if they are not going to a known sender, hold those. In certain cases, hold them for a period of time until you can contact the customer, have a conversation. We have specialized operations units now as a result of this that have sort of unique novel training. In the credit card space, if we see customers, we have the ability, it may sound a little creepy, but we can tell when you're buying gift cards, even if it's not obvious that you're buying gift cards. And we have defenses for those. We will refer those concerns to specialized operations groups to make contact with customers. So those are just a few of the ways that we're protecting customers. Because we were early in the journey, we had a really unique opportunity to partner with Amazon, the Better Business Bureau, and actually help co-develop the Better Business Bureau Scam Tracker. We are sponsors of the Scam Survivor Day. It is an incredible event. Would invite everyone to try to attend that. I think we're hosting again this year. We'll look forward to that. The big story from last year was that one of our survivors was actually tipped off to the fact that she'd been scammed because of a Capital One scam customer communication, which we send pretty regularly. So now to the other end, to the victim. Like transparently and like in a vulnerable moment, like this is probably a place where a lot of financial institutions have work to do because of where we sit. We're at the end. We don't really know, like we are truly just the financial transaction that's just taken place, but we are going to be the first person that gets the call. So without understanding any of the experience of the customer until they explain it to us, it's very difficult. We do have, especially in our bank business, like I said, specialized inbound units designed to provide an extra level of care for both our credit and bank businesses. Both, I think our microsite, which we maintain and update regularly, has references to if you've been a scam victim, here are the places you should go. The Better Business Bureau Scam Tracker is one of them. We will also refer customers in real time to those places. Work to do. Was blown away by the presentation yesterday. I've already talked to several people about ways that financial institutions can continue to take care of our customers here, and look forward to talking more after we hear from these folks. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Futterhoff. I'm with the AARP Fraud Watch Network helpline. How many of you knew that AARP has a fraud helpline? Okay, about half. Awesome. That's also my way of just making sure you can hear me. But again, I think I have 5 minutes to talk about our helpline. I could talk about it for 5 hours, and you guys don't want that. But I'm really proud of the work that we do on our helpline. The helpline's been around for over 10 years. And about a little bit about as long as I've been in this role. 10 years ago, we were taking 10,000 calls. Right now, we're taking about 100,000 calls. And you don't have to be an AARP member to give us a call. And I think there's a lot of people who don't know that. And so I think that's a really important thing to debunk. You don't have to be over 50 to call us either. And I think that's really important to know as well. We get calls from teenagers who might be involved in a video game scam, and they're asking us, and we're like, "What the heck is going on here?" And maybe some of our volunteers don't know exactly what that scam is, but they can still walk them through the steps to get to the next place. We're taking about 100,000 calls a year, roughly somewhere between 250 and 500 calls a day, 500 on the busiest days. We have about 150 volunteers who help us out managing those calls, and I mean, they're the reason this program works, and they're amazing. They're in about 35 different states. They work remotely, and so when a call comes into our helpline, the person will talk to, well, they'll hear a disclaimer, and then they will talk to an agent who will then triage their call. If they're deemed the victim of a scam, they ask them a couple questions, and if they're deemed the victim of a scam, at that point, they will get a little bit more information, and then we will put them in our queue to have one of our volunteers give them a call back. Each day, we have about 25 volunteers who are working on the helpline, and they each have a shift, roughly 2 hours, and they usually get somewhere between 5 and 10 calls to return back during that time period. And I mean, I can't say enough about our volunteers just because, again, they're how the program works and they're why the program works, but they also are they're the ones who are part of the program who really are the empathetic voice on the other end of the line that person might need. And the way that our helpline works is very much kind of a peer-to-peer model, where, again, it's really important that person has someone to talk to. Again, we hear over and over again that they might not tell their kids because they're scared of the repercussions of telling their kids. And so having that anonymous-ish voice on the other end who can assure them that this is happening to other people, they're not alone, all those types of things I think are critically important. And again, having that empathy, we don't give a time limit to our volunteers either. And so they might only get to 2 calls out of their 5 or 10 in that shift. But at the same time, they might talk to someone who says they needed to talk for an hour, and that's fine. You know, it might be an exhausting call. We get those a lot too. It might be exhausting, but at the same time, I think not having that limit is critically important for our volunteers. And again, we don't put pressure on them. You must get through a certain amount of calls in that time. And I think in the world of customer service today, that's very rare. And we talk to many people who are very frustrated with not being able to talk to anyone when they're calling around trying to report this to different folks, or a lot of folks who don't care, or maybe an automated system, that type of a thing. And so I think that part of that special sauce within our program is, again, that very personal touch and the volunteers who are behind it. In addition to that, one of the things that we provide are additional services to folks who are experiencing scams. One of them, Liz is back here, and she's helped spearhead our victim support program, which is essentially like a program where, again, someone who might need a little bit more time and maybe in their healing process of being victimized by a scam can then join a support group that's virtual, and they can then talk about scams with other people who've been victimized too, again, understanding that they're not alone in that situation. We've also tried to do some additional support services in terms of trying to get folks connected to tech support programs too. We piloted with a large tech support entity and have gone away from that because we're working kind of in-house with making referrals to Oates and Senior Planet in terms of, again, doing tech support based upon that as well. I wanted to read a couple of numbers from a survey that we did of helpline callers. I think I saw Alicia. She helped us with that from AARP Research. She helped us in terms of, again, getting reactions about how their helpline experience was. And so we asked 300 different people who had called our helpline and had additional support from our volunteers. 85% of folks felt understood when they called our helpline. 78% said they received useful guidance, which I think is really important. 2/3 of folks said the person who they talked to was very knowledgeable, which I think is, again, very, very important. Again, as part of our volunteer process, they go through a rigorous training program, and it probably equates to 20 or 30 hours of time before they actually get on the line with a caller. And so it's good that again, they're getting some useful experience there as well. A similar percentage, again, about 70% of folks said that they had an empathetic reaction with the person who was on the line with them. And there are a couple other numbers. 71% said they felt encouraged after their call. 65% said they felt comforted after their call. And 78% of folks said they received guidance that they considered useful. And 80% of them took action based upon that. And so at the end of the day, really, really important that they're doing these types of things after the phone call, and all these calls, our research happened within about 10 days, within at least 10 days of when they called our helpline. So in summary, I again, just want to make sure that everyone knows that we exist, that you can refer stuff and people of all ages to us, regardless of their membership status, anything like that. You can stop by our booth. We have little notepads and also little cards that you can pick up in terms of referrals as well. But again, I know that we're all kind of doing this work, but at the same time, again, just having places to go is so critically important, and I'm excited to hear from the rest of you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Olson. I'm an attorney on Amazon's Customer Protection and Enforcement team. And despite what my title on the screen says, I'm not a software development engineer. Despite my best efforts, that still hasn't happened. I still have to practice law, but it is relevant to today's presentation. So I'm here to talk to you about a new program that in conjunction with several partners, Amazon has started down the path of providing pro bono legal services to victims of online scams. And so in partnership with the Better Business Bureau, Institute of Marketplace Trust, Davis Wright Tremaine Law Firm, and PBI, the Pro Bono Institute of America, we've launched what is called the Scam Justice Legal Clinic. And it's a free legal clinic that's dedicated to providing legal services to victims of scam and fraud. And I want to back up for a second and just talk about how the origins of the clinic started. In our everyday work, as I mentioned, I'm on an enforcement team for Amazon, so a legal enforcement team. And as part of that work, we investigate and take legal actions against scammers that are harming our customers. as part of that work, we would often spend a good deal of time speaking with, interacting with, and learning from the victims of online scams. And in the course of interacting with victims, one of the things that became increasingly clear to us was that there was no avenue for victims of scams to pursue legal recourses or get advice on their legal rights and remedies after they were victimized. And there's a tremendous amount of incredibly valuable resources for victims, and more coming all the time, which is wonderful. But that seemed to be a gap that was missing in the market of what was available. And oftentimes victims of scam and fraud face really unique situations that can cause anxiety and stress on top of the already what can be, and we've heard a lot about, the crippling anxiety and pressure and stress and embarrassment. So for example, one of those issues may be tax complications from being involved in an investment scam or a crypto scam or a romance scam. If you prematurely take money out of your 401k, there's penalties associated with that. That now, in addition to everything else that victims are experiencing, they have to deal with on top of that. In some situations, for example, maybe victims are brought into the scam unwittingly, and they become unwitting what we refer to as money mules as part of the scam, which is essentially a way to launder funds for scammers. And even though it's unwitting, victims can sometimes be put in the precarious situation of participating in a crime while at the same time being a victim. Those types of situations left them in a place where they needed specialized advice, someone to talk to, and someone that could give them guidance on the type of things that they were experiencing. And out of that, the Scam Justice Legal Clinic was born. And the model for the clinic is a limited service legal model. So it's a clinic model that allows victims to sign up for hour sessions. And during that hour session, they're allowed to receive, or they do receive, dedicated legal advice from a pro bono attorney that can help them navigate their particular issues and come up with a plan and identify what they should be doing to protect themselves and make sure that they're not victimized in the future. Now, the reason that we went with a clinic model as opposed to direct representation was because it was the type of organization that allowed us to scale and assist as many clients as possible without having to take on direct representation of everyone. So if pro bono attorneys could only see one client that was required to receive an extraordinary large amount of legal advice, it would limit the total number of clients that could be seen. So this is a no files in, no files out model that allows them to come in, seek legal advice, and then the representation ends at the end of the session. If they have follow-up questions, they can come back for more, they can talk to an attorney again, and they can help be advised on this. And we're incredibly excited about what the future of this program holds. We officially launched our beta phase where we started seeing clients, but at a limited scale to try to work out all of the bugs that would be associated with this at Scam Survivor Day that the BBB hosted in May of this year. And we're hoping as we go into 2026 that we're going to open up the floodgates here for more attorneys to volunteer, more clients to be seen, and that'll allow us to kind of scale and build on the type of program that we currently have. And so we think that this is an incredible opportunity to provide victims something that currently doesn't exist in the marketplace. And more importantly, what we find when we interact with victims in this experience is that sometimes, even if someone comes to the table with specific questions about how to recover money, if they can become whole again, even if that's not an option, and even if they can't recover, the ability to work through the issues that they're facing, the ability to talk about what happened and speak with someone who can knowledgeably explain to them how this works, what they're experiencing, how the legal process works, and what they should be doing, gives them peace of mind that allows them to start to recover, even if they don't receive their money. And so it's been an incredibly valuable experience for us, and we continue to look forward to working with more law firms and pro bono attorneys and other victim services organizations as we kind of join in our effort to provide this type of service. So thank you, and if you have any questions afterwards, please come find me. I'm happy to talk about it.
Good afternoon. My name is Trina Clayu. I am the CEO of an organization called Give an Hour. We're a national mental health nonprofit. We've been around, I'm proudly to say, we are in our 20th year of operation, and we've been working in fraud victim recovery space for almost 4 years now. The way that we're modeled, and I love hearing how Tom describes it because I think we're in a very similar thing, is that we have pro bono licensed mental health professionals who give an hour of no-cost mental health care to populations that we work with fraud recovery being one of them. And so we have a network of mental health professionals across the nation in all 50 states. And we're continuing to grow that. So part of our model is clinical care. What we know is that there are not nearly enough clinicians who've had any exposure to this type of trauma. They've not had exposure that this is very significant of a crime, if they're even thinking that it's a crime. But when people come out into the profession, there's not a pathway for really training yourself or learning more about fraud recovery and how you can provide clinical care access. So that's one thing that we've taken on. I'll tell more about that. Our second line of effort that we do in this space is offer a trauma-informed peer support groups. And it's always kind of fun because I feel like I'm always doing a marketing job on peer support. It doesn't have a great marketing plan, but it's such an effective, it's a low cost, high yield, incredibly effective way for victims to find a tribe of other people who've had a similar experience. And that empathy is truly just built into the design. What I will say is with the trauma-informed model, the way that we operate our model is that we work with scam survivors who become facilitators of those groups. And we pay them for their time and expertise. And I think that's an important piece just that we've found that's really important is that these are individuals who've gone through really traumatic experience and they're using their lived experience to help others and help themselves. Then we also have clinicians who are trained in this particular crime recovery who actually do oversight and consultation with those facilitators. So they get a lot of warm touches to make sure that they're on their recovery pathway while they're helping someone else or a group of people. And our model, I always think it's a part science, part art, is that you're really building intentionality into these peer support models. So we're always working to try to increase protective factors and decrease risk factors of individuals who come into these groups. And I'll give a couple examples of what that looks like. It's very bottom up. So people tell us what they want and need, and we design back what they say they want and need and bring it to them and then find out, did this work? Is this what you're looking for? And then we can go back and improve that model. But one of the things that we know that our victims are looking for is good, solid legal advice. Even if it's not personally for them, it's general questions that they may have. And many people that have been scammed a second or a third time by hiring a lawyer that's not really a lawyer, or it's not a lawyer who has their best interest at heart. And so what in a partnership like this, what we'll be able to do, and we already have in small order as we're building together, which is to get a scam victim who is probably being scammed again by a lawyer or someone acting as a lawyer, is to get that person connected to free legal advice. And I know out of Tom's group, they're actually going to come to our scam group so we can talk again, take it one step up, not talk about your personal experience, but talk about questions that you need to understand in the legal context. Or people have asked for financial, like how do we build back a financial advisor who could help us build back from kind of zero? Who do we trust in that space? So we can bring those resources back into those spaces, which again helps people accelerate their recovery. And then the last thing that we offer is a really specialized, customized education and training for business and industry. And I love what you said, Hunter, about we find this all the time. Law enforcement talks about it, business talks about it, industry talks about it, which is the tension that you're trying to hold between the business aspect of what you do and the victim aspect of what that person's experience is. And as you're trying to build out that, it is a tension, and we understand that. And so what we try to do is really understand how your business works, about what you have in place, what you don't, what are you hoping to achieve? Are you wanting people to become e-commerce again, to be consumers? Do you want to build brand reputation, make sure they come back to you? Are you just trying to do good for the greater system? Like if we can really understand those things, again, we can intentionally design them, not only for the victim experience, but for your frontline experience or, the experience that that victim is having with your organization. And so there's, again, I think the art and science of it is really really trying to build back the intentionality into these spaces. And so part of what we want to do is build awareness for this, that mental health is, beyond what you may see. These individuals, we're seeing people 6, 7, 8 years out who are still haven't told a family member, who are still struggling in silence. I know we talked a little bit about shame earlier when Mel was up here, significant amount of shame. And so the antidote to shame is empathy. And I love the fact that we're talking about how do you build those things up front in the system, because their recovery journey starts on day one. It doesn't start after they report it. It doesn't start after they've gone through and filled out paperwork and gone to different agencies. It starts with every single interaction that they have. And so when we do talk about trauma-informed, it's not just a buzzword. It's an intentional design aspect of how that person leaves that situation, even when you can't make them whole, even when you know that they may not get their money back. I will tell you time and time again, they tell us that they understand that part, even though in the moment they probably don't sound like they understand that part. They don't want it to happen to anyone else, and they're really looking to be validated in some way. And so what we want to do is help business and industry build that in intentionally up front and not as an afterthought, so that that person's recovery journey can start up front. Because I promise you, they are coming in incredibly high distress, not just about the money loss, but about the skepticism that they're facing at every door that they go to about how were they complicit in this? How long did you continue this? Don't you know that this wasn't a relationship? Why are you still struggling? These are a lot of the messages that they're hearing, even if that's not the exact wording that's being used, but they're very hypervigilant to how they're interacting with you and what you're saying or not saying in those moments. So we want to help those organizations, business and industry, to really make sure that that person is having an arc of recovery while you're still trying to get your investigative job done or your business job done or your protection job done. So we're thrilled to talk about this more. We really want to build this out as an international model. This doesn't have to just be a U.S. model. And I think the biggest one is the more that business and industry sees this as part of their business plan, and that, again, this isn't an add-on. A victim service isn't what we think about later, but what we think about up front. You are going to find that more and more people are going to be incredibly responsive and want to be partnered with you in some way.
Thank you. That actually links very well to what I'm about to say. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Els Bruggeman. I come from Europe. I come in peace. No, for those who don't know us yet, Euroconsumers is actually a group of national on-ground consumer organizations in Belgium, Italy, Spain, Portugal, also Brazil. And last week we opened a branch also in Poland. All of them membership-based. So this means we have a direct link, a direct line with the consumers, and we have a pretty good finger on the pulse of what's really bothering them. And so we are getting those calls. We are getting those calls of desperate scam victims every day. And we are not getting them because we are putting ourselves out there as a victim organization. We are getting them because we are a consumer organization. And for a while now, frauds and scam have been the #1 consumer complaint. So we get those stories of financial loss, obviously horrible stories. But just to give you an idea what is the real impact on individual consumers, let me just share 3 examples of stories that reached us at the Belgian organization just this week. There's one person who fell for a fake compliance service from a well-known Belgian bank. He lost 100,000 euros. There's one person who got a call from CardStop, basically telling him you need to secure your accounts. He lost 13,000 euros. And then there's another one who fell for an investment scam, 25,000 euros lost. And this is just a quick anthology. Obviously, you have stories with bigger losses. So the story of the 80-year-old that loses an entire life savings, it's very real. But also of smaller amounts. But even the smaller amounts have a huge impact on household budgets in a time when household budgets are already under stress. But obviously, like you said, it's not just the financial loss. Being a scam victim, it comes with a lot of emotional impact. It comes with guilt, shame, stress, anger, anxiety. sleep deprivation, even depression and suicide. You lose your faith in people, and you lose your trust in a digital economy. And this is something to take into account when they reach you, when they contact you. So how do we try to support them as a consumer group? I mean, as Euroconsumers, fighting frauds and scams is a big focus for us, and we try to fight it on different fronts. But here I really want to focus on the one-on-one support that we try to give to the people who reach out to us. Well, first of all, we offer them a listening ear. Just being able to tell their story without any shaming or blaming, believe me, for many of them, it already makes a huge difference. But of course, next to that, we try to guide them through the labyrinth of, reporting the actual scam. We tell them where to file a police report. We tell them to go to the bank. We tell them go to the telco provider. We tell them go to your social media platform, to the digital players. And honestly, it breaks my heart needing to send consumers on this lonely journey at the moment when they feel the most vulnerable. And it's only because we don't have one single point of contact where they can report. It should be the other way around. Instead of sending them from here to there in this very fragile state of mind, all of these people should be coming together and work for the victim. And that's why we have been calling for these national anti-scam centers already for a while now. And luckily we have the support of many other organizations like CIFAS and also GASA. But next to that, we also invest a lot in offering legal support and helping them to get the money back. Because newsflash, without any help, they rarely get any money back. Only 3%, according to a survey, was able to recover the funds. In Europe, we have a law in place that says that the banks need to refund you in case of fraud. But there's a big exception in case of gross negligence. And here's where the fun starts, as you can imagine. And helping consumers, helping scam victims, survivors, getting the money back. Of course, we know it's not a miracle solution. The impact of the scam goes way beyond it, but it can already make a huge difference if you get the money back. And even more, it can give scam survivors that feeling of justice, and that's what they need. So how do we try to do this? Basically, we address it at 3 different levels, going from very individually to more collective. Well, the first level is very much a one-on-one approach. For example, our Spanish organization, OCU, has developed a specific legal offer for scam victims. Now, most of the low-value scams can already be fixed or can already be addressed with a non-judicial intervention. Just having a consumer organization writing to the banks, pointing out their legal duties, often it can lead to a quick fix, to a quick solution. But in many, many other cases, that won't do this. And this is especially true for the more complex scams or the more high-value scams. Now, in this case, we offer legal support from the whole journey, from the beginning to the very end, until the legal claim is solved with the help of our lawyers. Now, that's the first level. Now, the second level, when you're doing all of this, individual cases, you can also sometimes spot structural problems that require a structural solution. Just to give you an example, our Belgian organization, Testachat, they spotted the same problem with the same banks refusing to refund over and over again. And of course, one option could be to keep on fighting this, very individually, or you can take these cases and elevate them to some exemplary cases. And that's what they did. They basically identified 2 specific cases against 2 specific banks, and they brought them to court. And with this legal decision in hand, they have a strong legal precedent whenever they tried or refuse to refund the next time. At least it should make them think twice. And in both cases, the Belgian organization, we won the case, and one bank is still appealing, but we're pretty confident that we will win this one as well. Now, the final stage is a more collective one. And here I want to just give you the example of the booking case that we have launched. maybe you heard, I'm pretty sure, especially in the UK, you heard that there's a lot of problems with Booking.com, which is a booking platform based in the Netherlands, and it's very well known in Europe. So what happened? You book a trip, and just 2 days before you're about to arrive, you get a call, there's a problem with the payment, and you need to re-enter your credit details. It looks like booking, it sounds like booking, only it isn't booking. And many people got scammed there. So we could go after the visual scammers, but the thing here is that they wouldn't be able to do this without the data that they retrieved some way from the Booking.com environment. They knew where you were going, they knew your name, your address, personal details. So there must have been an issue in the booking environment. And that's why we filed a complaint with the Dutch Data Protection Authority. And we also launched a call to other consumers to come forward. And many of them did. So when we have this decision of the Dutch Data Protection Authority, we can ask the money back from Booking for all these consumers together. We can hold Booking accountable, and even more, we can give this feeling of justice back to the scam survivors. Now, I know as a consumer organization, what we do is just a tiny bit of the puzzle, but at least we try to do our bit and bring a little of justice back to the scam survivors. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. It's really helpful to hear about what we currently are doing to support victims. And all of this is very encouraging. Now I would like to invite up our next speakers. Erin Borg from Aspen Institute is going to lead a discussion on the gaps. What are we not doing? What more could we be doing?
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you to GASA for having us. While people are getting situated, and I think Kathy's going to come join us too, I would just encourage you to take your headphones off for just a second and give your ears a break. As someone who is just sitting there wearing earrings, I just might need a second. So take a second, and then when I see people start to put them back on, then we'll get on with the rest of the conversation. And for this conversation, I want to take a page out of Kathy's book and talk like humans. And I think that's something that you constantly do well is I feel like probably most of you are paneled out. We are like a few hours away from the conclusion of a super, super packed agenda. So we're going to try to talk like humans in this conversation. So what you've just heard over the last few minutes are some really fantastic examples of both private sector investment, philanthropic, and consumer advocates really stepping up in scam recovery, which is really, really encouraging to see. And part of the reason that we're both encouraged by that leadership is because of the organizations that are doing really, really incredible work for victims of scams. But it also means that there's a huge gap that our federal government has not picked up. So we've seen a ton of private sector leadership, social sector. I see our consumer advocate friends in the room and in this panel, and I think all of that work is incredibly important. And we have some really significant gaps in the US, in the UK, and across Europe, which is what we're going to get into today. So we have heard now several different slices or takes on the FTC data, but one, I think the Fortune 17 example is a great one. But when our team were talking about how to slice this data and think about it, one thing that we've thought about is looking at the data that's out this week. The loss of scams to every man, woman, and child in the U.S. last year was $550. So that's every person in the U.S. has lost the equivalent of $550 just last year alone. That's money that could be spent on saving for retirement, buying groceries, car payment, real things that coming from a financial security background, there is not $550 of slack in most people's budget in the last year. So that's really where we're coming from at the Aspen Institute is how do we ensure the financial security of all households? And it starts with protecting the assets that people have. So I'm going to ask you all to reintroduce yourselves because you're sitting with a different set of people, although I believe you all have been on stage at some point over the last 2 days. And start with tell us a little bit about who you are, who you're representing, and start with where do you see the biggest gaps in scam recovery from where you sit? So we have really different approaches. We have no strategy in the US, although I have been encouraged by how many .gov email addresses are in attendance this year relative to last year. It's really been encouraging. So we've got US, no strategy, UK, a strategy, and an approach. What's still missing? And poor Alice has to figure out not just a strategy in one country, but how do you do a coordinated strategy across member states that all have really different size economies, really different capacity and availability of tech. So what are the gaps from where you sit? And then I'll come sit with you guys. Kathy, you want to start with you?
I'll start. Hi, everybody. Kathy again. And Tom, at least you were up there. I read this question in this amazing memo that Erin put together, and I still don't know how to answer it. There is so much that we need to be doing that I don't think I can answer that question. There's so much we need to be doing. They talk about left of boom, right of boom. On the left side of stopping the scams from getting to people in the first place. That for me is where my emotions are sent right now. We've just got to stop this, right? But in the recovery space, it's all of it. It's financial, it's emotional, it's the legal, it's legislative solution. So I'm really sorry, but I can't give you one. Okay, all right.
So hello and good afternoon, everyone. So my name's Simon Miller. I'm Director of Policy, Communications and Strategy at CIFES, which is the UK's leading fraud prevention service. So we provide products, services to businesses and consumers to keep them safe from the harm caused by scams and fraud, including managing the UK's national fraud database, as well as also providing training that also helps businesses look after their people and their customers as well. So where are the gaps in the UK? Well, I think there's a number. We have a patchwork of restitution services that try to cater to the needs of victims. Often they're very siloed and very niche. They're doing really good work, but in a deep, narrow way, rather than across the broad sweep of need that we see. I think there are two issues, both of which hadn't really been touched upon over the course of the sessions in the last 2 days. The first is in relation to romance scams, where it's not just about the financial loss. It's actually about the process of grief and mourning and massive psychological damage that is caused by discovering that the person that you were in a relationship with for 6 months, 9 months, sometimes much, much longer, is actually gone. And we don't do enough to support those people and their real heartache and need at a time of absolute grief. And the second is in relation to identity fraud. So I said we manage the UK's national fraud database. Half of all the reports filed to us concern identity fraud, so the theft of your identity, either in part or in whole. And the reason why this is such an attractive thing for the scammers is because unlike a single scam or a purchase scam or an investment scam that happens once, identity fraud means you hit again and again and again. And the process of trying to restore your identity is incredibly, incredibly complicated. And we need to do more to make it easier. Because if you lose your digital identity or your actual identity, you end up in a lot of trouble over a prolonged period. I should apologise, Erin, because I was talking in depth with Els whilst you were introducing us. Please. And that's because I fell victim to the Booking.com scam over the course of the summer. Fortunately, my bank realised it was a scam and stopped the payments. But I was just giving power to Els' elbow there and saying, go on, go for them. They really deserve it.
Well, thanks for the cheers on. So hi everyone. So I'm Els Bruggeman again. So I work at Head Policy and Enforcement at Euroconsumers. You asked me to identify a few gaps. I mean, honestly, I don't know where to begin, but I will try to focus on some of them. And maybe I will not focus on the Belgian or the national angle, but even more the European Union angle. I think lots, at least in getting the money back, lots can already be done by making the legislation a bit clearer. And as we speak, this is happening in Europe now. They are in the final round of negotiations, finding a new regulation. They should be able to deliver before the end of the year. I don't know if they will make it. Long story short, what is the problem right now? Right now, there's an obligation on banks to refund in case of fraud. But like said, there's this big exception, gross negligence. And, obviously, they play a lot with that. Basically, banks say we don't need to refund if consumers authorize the payment or they validate the transaction, meaning they made the transfer themselves, they gave away the passwords, they clicked the button. But this is completely ignoring the reality of how scams have developed since this legislation was put in part. Nowadays, we have social engineering. They use social engineering, incredible behavioral insights based on your data coming from social media, but also security gaps, to basically build a relationship and manipulate you to make the transfer. Nowadays, technology allows scammers to meticulously duplicate the website of banks. Thanks to ChatGPT, there are no longer spelling mistakes in phishing emails. And thanks to AI, they can imitate, copy the voices and the faces of the people you trust and you love. So, yes, consumers are making the transaction, but you can no longer claim that they authorize it. So we need to change this paradigm. And one of the things that is included in this new law says that whenever there's an impersonation of the bank, then it's clear that they should get a refund. But obviously, that doesn't go far enough. There's many more, for example, there's many more impersonations of trusted private stakeholders or public authorities. But the thing with this law is and the banks are not really happy with it, we focus a lot on the financial institutions. And they're not really happy about it. And honestly, I think they're right. They come at the very end of the scam chain. But there are other players that bear equally responsibility who come in the beginning. And let's call a spade a spade. Many of these scams originate on social media platforms. And that's why we really would like to have this included in this law, that there's some kind of a joint liability, at least not put everything on the shoulders of the banks, but that's a difficult one to crack, apparently. And this actually brings me to one of the most important things that I would like to mention here. We can focus a lot on legislation, and of course this is important and we need to fix it. But what is really lacking here is a joint approach. It's missing in the regulation, but it's missing on ground, and it's missing in politics. We focus a lot on the banks, on the financial institutions, but we are not going to fix scams by focusing on them alone. It's the work of all of us and all of them. It's the work of platforms, telcos, of obviously banks, but also consumer organizations. And I believe that part is really missing, and you can see the impact on ground immediately, nationally, but also at the European level. They focus a lot on the financial institutions here, but there's also the department working on consumers, there's the department working on digital players, there's a department working on telcos, obviously there's Europol and enforcement. What are they doing? And are they even talking to each other? Is there enough political alignment and consensus? You say in the US you don't have a strategy, but yesterday at least we have the call. At least it was very clear that it was a political priority. At this moment, we don't have this yet at the European level.
Thanks for all those perspectives. I think there's growing consensus that the US ought to have a strategy, and we're eagerly waiting in the wings, ready with lots of ideas about how to think about a comprehensive whole of ecosystem approach to that strategy. So Simon, I want to turn to you to dig in a little bit on sort of what are your reflections now that the UK strategy, particularly around sharing liability between sending and receiving banks. I'm curious for your perspective, and maybe a little spicy. Are you seeing a reduction in fraud and scams as a result of the strategy? And sort of now that the strategy has been in place for a little bit, What are the gaps? What are you seeing? What are your lessons learned that you want to share with your European and American colleagues who are sort of deep in the process of working on our own strategy? We're all, of course, eagerly watching Australia, which is taking a broader spectrum approach, but hasn't been implemented yet. So what are you seeing? What are you learning? What advice do you have for your colleagues on either side?
So a 2-word answer. Is that what you're hoping for? Excellent. Okay, so we do have a strategy.
For more than 2 words. I'll give you 10.
Excellent. We do have a strategy, and we're about to have a new strategy, and we're already identifying gaps in that strategy. It's a bit unfair on government because government is doing what it can. I think we're very lucky in the UK that we have, for the first time ever, a dedicated fraud minister. So historically, the UK system has been a patchwork of conflicting, competing, different jurisdictions and authorities, 43 different police forces, 19 government departments, and more governmental bodies than you could shake a stick at. But things have started to change. And the UK, particularly in the space of restitution, is now an outlier via the rest of the world. So if you are scammed in the UK, if you authorise a payment to a scammer, you will be refunded. And you will be refunded up to £88,000, so that's roughly $100,000, within 5 working days. And all you need to do is make a call to your bank for that to happen. Now, obviously, this hasn't been universally popular with the banking industry, but there's a whole load of nuance to this as well, because as Erin pointed out, the regulation falls not just on the sending bank, but also the receiving bank. Historically, the situation was that we had a voluntary code, but only the 9 largest banks signed up to, which meant that the 1,342 regulated payment service providers in the UK, the vast majority were under no obligation to refund you. Many were neobanks or fintechs and had different security standards compared to the big 9 retail banks. And some of them were absolute meccas, particularly where they linked into cryptocurrency for fraudulent transactions. The 50% liability between sending and receiving banks has massively ramped up the amount of money that those fintechs, those neobanks, those broadly 1,336, I think that's the math there, banks who have suddenly been brought into regulation now have to comply with that. And they are ramping up their investment, which means their protections are better. This has had no discernible... So levels of fraud and scams in the UK have gone up yet again. Just for context, fraud is now 44% of all reported crime in the UK, 4.3 million instances each year. Scams are estimated to be worth about £9.4 billion in terms of consumer loss. Fraud, about £219 billion, so hugely significant sums of money. But there's nothing to say that the rule changes and mandatory reimbursement has changed that landscape at all. There was genuine concern on the part of the banks that actually mandatory reimbursement might encourage people to commit fraud, because Els, who is a known fraudster, might contact me and say, look, why don't we go on this together? You pay me, you make the claim, we'll split the difference. Everyone's a winner. That so-called moral hazard hasn't happened and doesn't appear to be happening. What does appear to be happening is that by broadening the number of regulated entities who bear a responsibility for fraud, further controls are being put in place, systems are improving, detection is getting better, the willingness of the industry to collaborate with one another and through organisations like ours is also changing. And I'll just, if I may, address the point that Els made around big tech and social media. So we have a different system in the UK where big tech and the content that it serves is now regulated. It was 6 years in the making as a piece of legislation. And if certain systems and processes aren't in place, and particularly it's around harmful content or content that should not be served up to minors, those companies can be fined up to 10% of global turnover. So the figures involved are absolutely staggering. So it's not a shared liability for the exact costs of meeting fraud, but there's a huge regulatory stick being aimed at providers of content and fraudulent, or enablers of fraudulent content, to make sure they get their houses in order and they do more to make sure that the content that we receive as consumers is safe, and that they are incentivized to share data and to work with a wider ecosystem so that we can all enjoy those platforms with degrees of security that previously we might not.
Thanks for that. And I don't know that we've heard a ton in the last 2 days about the size of how the size of institution really makes a difference in thinking about investment and ability to do better fraud and scam risk detection. So, Els, something that we experience quite a lot in the US is a number of global companies are headquartered here. And so a lot of what we're hearing, I think very fairly, is, okay, a lot of countries are exploring regulatory approaches. If I'm a large global company headquartered in the US, I need to think about what that means, not just in the market that I operate here in the US, but also across a range of countries that are all sort of trying to figure out what the regulatory environment will look like. And being situated in the EU, you are no stranger to that. So I'm curious for sort of your perspective on how you're thinking about both the individual member state experience of a fraud strategy and sort of where you're hoping to see, what you're hoping to see out of the new EU regulations that start to get at some of that coordination and not creating 20 different regulatory regimes, which the UK is no longer a part of. But
they left us. You're welcome.
Yeah,
come back.
We probably won't solve Brexit
We won't
on
solve
this
Brexit
panel,
here.
but stay tuned for next year. Maybe we'll get to it.
No, I totally get your point, and honestly, it's not just a problem for US-based companies, it's equally a problem for EU-based companies. In all transparency, just coming back on what Simon just said, we have a similar provision in place for social media players. It's the Digital Service Act. I hear many players in the US hate it, but it's really to ensure a fair and a healthy digital market. And it does impose some obligations on platforms to keep them safe or keep them scam free. The problem, as always, is in the enforcement, and it doesn't really link it to, getting the money back to consumers and splitting the funds to get the money back. So just to clarify, it's not like they're completely off the hook, but joint liability would increase the pressure a bit. In terms of fragmentation in Europe and beyond, I totally get it. At the national level, we have been calling for national anti-scam centers to cover this fragmentation. And initially, I have to admit, as a consumer organization, we approached it from a consumer perspective, because hearing these stories every day, we were quite baffled to see how we could send consumers at their most vulnerable moment from one place to the other. So we wanted to change the narrative a little bit and say, let's all come together and work for these scam victims, these scam survivors. And if they're already working for the victim, then they can also work better together to actually catch the guys. So this is the thing that we would like to see at the national level. But like you said, I mean, it doesn't make sense to have it in one country and not in another. Belgium is tiny. So you can imagine that scammers, they don't have borders and they really don't care about Belgian borders. So this brings me back to what's happening at the European level. And like I said, now there's a regulatory focus on the financial part, but there's equally other departments. I mean, excuse me for the slang, but we work in DGs. So we have DG Just, who is our go-to consumer protection authority at European level. But you equally have DJ Home, you have DG Connect, you have DJ FISMA. What are all of them doing? And when you speak to them, I mean, and I honestly believe them, they say, yes, it's a priority for us and we are working on them. But then I'm wondering, how does this fit into the bigger picture? Are you actually talking to each other? Are you aligning? I mean, I have to say, I'm also a bit of the girl of the glass half full. So I do have hopes and high expectations. Because last week they announced the consumer agenda, which is basically setting out a program for consumer protection, consumer rights for the next 5 years. And we've seen, when they just started consultation about it 2 years ago, we were quite surprised to see there was nothing about scams in there. So we needed to raise our hand and say, look, do you know what the most common consumer complaint is right now? It is scams. And we're very happy to see that at least now in the consumer agenda, they have announced an action plan on digital scams. We have no idea what it's going to be. We have no idea who's going to be involved. But from what we they say they are going to announce it in April next year. So, give them some credit. But we already know of what we heard, that there will be several DGs involved. But the big question is, will this be enough? Will there be enough coordination and alignment across the different departments? And will this be enough to give a strong political signal that scams is an issue and it should be a political priority, not only on national level, but also at a European level for both consumers, but like you said, also for businesses, because they need to know what is going on and what will be coming up.
Yeah, Kathy, I want to bring you into the National Anti-Scam Center as a potential strategy here to talk about some of the work you've been doing with NEFC and sort of thinking about that as a potential model for better coordination. But I will just briefly interject to say that earlier this year and last year as well, our GAO issued a report just looking at the 13 different federal agencies to whom you can report a fraud or scam in the U.S. government. And it was a really, damning report that basically concluded 13 different agencies you can report a scam to. They each use a different definition of fraud and scam. So even getting a sort of what is public sector reporting, getting one number has really been challenging. And so I think it sort of speaks to if it's everyone's priority or it's in every agency's sort of top 5 issue without dedicated funding streams and additional staffing to sort of execute on that. Is it really a priority that you can demonstrably show that it is? So Kathy, I would love to get your take on sort of what you're seeing, other approaches to national anti-scam centers, this idea of coordinating with law enforcement, private sector, sort of bringing all of the people who are touching 1/40th of the elephant together.
Yeah, those are really great questions. And just housekeeping, we only have about 5 minutes left, and we were going to try to do sort of a round of getting your insights and sharing them. And we had ideas of Post-it notes and boards up, and realized when we came here that we couldn't do that. So what I want to ask for you to do when you're here in the seat or as you're walking away or when you're back home, send an email to us at the Fraud Watch Network, FWN, at AARP.org, and tell us where you think we should be going from here. We've got financial recovery, emotional recovery, we've got legal recovery. We have just trying to help people understand what a big problem this is. So please send your ideas. I'm on the board of the North American chapter of GASA, and Aspen is as well, and Amazon is as well, and we're going to bring this back and have the conversation about what comes next. Now, as far as national initiatives, I do want to talk about this National Elder Fraud Coordination Center. If you haven't heard about it, 501c3 nonprofit. It launched in April, and its whole goal is to bring the private sector fraud intelligence that's out there together with law enforcement cases, particularly elder fraud, because that's where the biggest losses are, and tie that information together to create, first, an organized crime lens, because this is organized crime, and we can't be looking at it as the $10,000 grandparent scam over there or the $50,000 tech support scam over there. We've got to bring them together because, at least in the United States, we have about $1 million threshold with federal agencies before they'll go after anything. And this organization, it has 4 founders. It's sitting right now within the National Cyber Forensics and Training Alliance, NCFTA, in Pittsburgh. So he's getting support, the CEO, from some of those companies. But just since April, they've had meaningful impact on existing FBI and HSI cases where they were able to turn, for example, a single victim $300,000 romance scam. In a period of 2 weeks, it became $3 million. So that is meaningful. And I really want you to think about how your organizations can come to the table and support the law enforcement focus on this. I know a lot of people will say, well, you can't arrest your way out of it. How about trying? You can't educate your way out of it. No, we can't. We can't engineer our way out of it. But if we're all doing that, all of it, then maybe we have a solution. So if you want to learn more about NEFC, go to fightelderfraud.org. I'm on the board and would love to, if you haven't met the CEO, Brady Fint, I would love to introduce you, because I think this is where it's at. I really think this is where it's at. And by the way, Minister of Fraud, is that what you guys are going for?
That's what we have, yeah.
So when you get resumes, if I were to leave.
Maybe we'll have a commissioner for fraud in Europe one day. So I'll keep your name in mind.
Els, you said, I'm going to give us a sort of last word, an impromptu question, but you said just a minute ago that you were a glass half full optimist. So let's end with give us something that gives you hope as you're leaving here, been sitting and listening to lots of very smart people across a range of public and private sector over the last 2 days. What gives you hope?
Well, optimism is a moral duty, but even more. No, I really am a girl of the glass half full. And what really gives me hope is actually being here and seeing so many people, so many stakeholders across different sectors doing their tiny bit. And if we all can do our tiny bit together, then I think we have a good chance of, at least being able to tackle the beast. Will it be perfect? It never will. But just seeing the will of so many people, so many stakeholders here together, it gives me a lot of inspiration and hope to get to take with me back to Europe after the jet lag.
Simon, what about you?
So as a British citizen, hope is a difficult thing. But what I would say is this gives me hope. People coming together, identifying the problem and showing real willingness to work together. But I think we all need to keep in mind that fraud and scams are vast. And when you eat an elephant, you start with the first bite. And as long as we can do that, as long as we focus on the tangible, focus on the real, and also concentrate on prevention, because prevention is always better than cure. How can we keep consumers safe in the first instance? How can we share that grey data that suggests that something's probably up and we should do something about it? And focus on that rather than trying to solve the whole thing will be off to a really, really good start.
That was so optimistic. My husband's English. I don't know that he would be able to answer that question. Kathy, what about you?
Well, first of all, I love hope is a moral obligation. Mm-hmm. My mind, it's always been hope is not a good financial plan because of where I came from. But now I really I'm just going to adopt that. Being here for the 2 days, I've been involved in GASA since I think Yori Abraham came up with the idea 5 years ago, sort of tangentially and more involved in these last couple of years. But to see the DC event go from 250 people last year, standing room only, to 600 plus people here, also people online, and everybody, they seem to be coming here and saying, yeah, we're already rolling up our sleeves, but let's do some more and let's do it together. That's hope. That's hope for me.
And I know that you have an opportunity to get one last hit of caffeine before the last panels of the day. I know I will be getting a Diet Coke. So please join me in thanking our panelists. And you guys are done with breakouts. All right.